So for the third video in this series of why a narrative is important for fighting games, I'm going to talk about what I talked about in other vlogs for this subject, and that is Super Turbo. The last two videos, of course, I would suggest watching before this were how the Dust Loop saved Guilty Gear, changing it from a series that was just surviving to a series that succeeded. And it succeeded because now you had a character in the narrative competitively who you could also see the Street Fighter in him. The Dust Loop, from a certain perspective, actually is Street Fighter. And by going off these core fundamentals of Street Fighter, we then had a character that was easy to digest and taught us about Guilty Gear. And the Karna's Revenge video was showing off a game with a failed narrative. The game is not shown off well. Although Karnov shows off the game's potential and narrative well, although Karnov the character, I should say, Karnov the character shows off the game's potential and narrative well for a casual audience to see. He's only one of the top 5 characters in the game, and the top 5 characters in this game are very, very powerful. And the other top characters are generally quite bland, and they don't show off the game as well. And Mizuguchi is a character who shows off the game well, but he's a mid-tier character, and to play him to that specific level where it makes the narrative work and interesting and easily digestible for the potential player, it's not there, right? So then what do we have this video it's about? This video is about Super Turbo. And we'll watch this match as I talk. This video demonstrates why the narrative in a fighting game is potentially so important. Think about what is really happening here from a narrative perspective in this match. We have 2 top tier characters who show off what the game can be and what it is about. We have Old Sagat, who represents perhaps the old school player, the player who enjoys the classic Fireball Dragon Punch trap, a perhaps from a certain perspective simple idea that, although simple, has a drastic effect on the game, right? Then we have a character like Balrog. He represents the new ideal of what fighting games were going towards, right? The new idea, I should say, of what fighting games were going towards. The pushback against fireballs and DPs being so powerful. He also abuses the game system in a sense, and that his super is very strong. He has throw loops, he's in your face. He's using the game system very well, and he's teaching the audience about the new game system of Super Turbo, specifically with supers, right? There are 2 clear, distinct ideologies of what fighting games can be, and they are coming to a clash from a narrative perspective. And since they are both top tier, they are in the limelight of the game. They are directly in the competitive nature of Super Turbo, the competitive narrative of Super Turbo. And what they are both doing is easily digestible for the player to see and understand. They are in fact both the good guy, they are both the bad guy. There is no whining about this character is cheap, my character sucks, your character was good. They are both top tier. They are both the good guy and the bad guy of the game simultaneously. They are both showing off the game well. They are both Super Turbo. We see these characters and we think this is Super Turbo, right? This is a game that has a successful narrative. Of course, there are many other characters in the game. There are other characters that have their own narrative in the story, right? But hopefully you see what I'm getting at here and how the narrative can help a game. We could even continue and think about how the game like this, with potentially from some perspective, more clear-cut archetypes of characters, actually kind of helps Super Turbo maybe in a way be more unique, right? Because when you get into newer games and, when there's this kind of sense of we want everyone to be able to do a little bit of everything, it actually kind of makes the game less unique, right? It kind of ruins the narrative from a certain perspective, right? Anyway, hopefully you see what I'm getting at here, right? It's important to have a narrative in a game that can show off what the game is about, right? Guilty Gear, again, didn't have a great narrative until Soul and XX got the Dust Loop. And from the Dust Loop, it also showed off the importance of keeping core fundamental aspects in all fighting games. When you could see the Street Fighter and Guilty Gear, that's when it took off in the fighting game community. And then, of course, a game like Karna's Revenge, it does have unique stuff. but the narrative of the game is bad, so it didn't work. And again, this video was showing off the narrative of Super Turbo, the narrative of a game where there's that two core ideologies of what fighting games could be. The old school dude, Dragon Punches Fireballs, having such a Fireball Dragon Punch trap, having such a drastic influence on the match, right? Drastic impact. With the new ideology of supers, right? So now we have supers in the game. There's throw loops, you know what I mean? Rushing you down. We don't want any of this. But both these characters are the good guy and the bad guy at the same time. And they're both top tier. So it's both in the narrative of the game, and you're learning about what is Super Turbo. Do you get what I'm getting at? Anyway, the end.